In this video, I want to introduce you to the concept of promises. So before I get into defining exactly what a promise is and how they work, I want to talk about the problem that promises are trying to solve and frame it in that context. The problem that promises are trying to solve is nothing new. It's been around for a long time. That is, if I have an asynchronous operation, how do I deal with the results of that asynchronous operation? It can either complete and give me a result, or it can end in an error, and I need to know about these things. So I'm going to kind of use this old school, just a text document, and write some pseudocode here in a language that I'm just making up on the fly. So if you're a programmer, hopefully you can just follow along. So I'm going to execute a query using a command, and that command, the way it's written in this example, will return results to me synchronously. So I'm going to create a new command, query champions command, and I'm going to execute it. So obviously this line of code runs and it will return the results to me. That means it runs synchronously, and whatever code executes this is going to be blocked while my query is running. And as I've outlined in other videos, this is not what we want. We want to move things off of the main execution thread in your application so that things can run concurrently. So if I were to rewrite this in a concurrent way, I'm not going to get anything back, and this is how we've typically dealt with this kind of thing in the past. So I create the command and I execute it, but I have to pass along a handler for the completion. And I'm going to pass along something known as a closure, which is just a piece of code that will get executed later. And again, I'll call this function, and I'm going to accept the results. So do something with the results. So this is an example of a way to handle the results from a concurrent operation. What happens here is I call the execute function and I pass along a closure, which is another function, and the command keeps a reference to this closure, and when it gets the results, it invokes the function that I passed to it as an argument on the execute method and passes the results along to me. So that's all fine and well. Here's a couple other ways that this has been solved in the past. I'm going to create a command instance and hold a reference to it. But then the command is going to dispatch events when certain things happen. So I'm going to add an event listener to it, and I'm going to listen for the result event, and I'm just making this up as I go. And the handler is going to be a function that accepts the result. So do something. And then that is similar to the other example. But I may get an error also, so I better listen for that. So if the command fails for whatever reason, so I have to add a listener for that. So these are two, oh, and then I got to execute it down here. So what happens is I create the command here, and then I have to add a listener for the result, and I have to add a listener for the error, and then I have to execute it. And at some point in the future, the command is going to either dispatch this event, the result event, or the error event, and it will invoke my handler function that I pass along to it. Oh, and then I forgot, in both cases, I have to remove the event listener to clean up. So I don't want to leave event listeners hanging around. Remove also the error event. So I have to do this in both cases, and you can see this ends up being quite a bit of code. And the other thing that occurs in both scenarios is that the command that I'm executing must keep a reference to all these functions or the listeners and manage them, and then invoke them properly and pass the correct things along to them. So this is the problem that promises are trying to solve. And these are sort of traditional ways of solving them in other languages. The key point in both of these asynchronous scenarios is that when I execute the command, it can't return anything because it runs asynchronously. It doesn't have a result or an error until later, sometime later. And the same here. I can't return anything and store it.